Hey, good morning. All right. I thought I saw you all over at AKA Kitchen the other night. They didn't wave back, I don't think. So I felt like an idiot, which is not new for me. But no, I'm just kidding. Great to see everybody here today. Hey, I have to, okay? I have to. There's a lot of talk right now. And I'm not going to talk about what you think I'm going to talk about because I don't care about that nonsense. There's a lot of talk around this rhetoric of peace through strength, okay? And a person who's pretty well known in the world made this audacious claim that Jesus would want peace through strength. And I would like to say that that is the most asinine, twisted, uninformed approach to Jesus. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but Luke chapter 14, Jesus is coming into Jerusalem. He looks over, he weeps, and he says, "You do not know the way to peace, the things that make peace." And his whole life was centered around nonviolence, care for the poor, right? All of these things. So I just want you to know, you can't expect people in the Jesus world to not speak up when people outside the Jesus world bring Jesus into that world, which we should, right? But I just want to say, in no way, shape, or form did Jesus ever endorse imperial Roman ideas of peace. Right? His whole march into Jerusalem that we celebrate on Palm Sunday was a demonstration against the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, which was through strength and violence. Okay. I think it would be irresponsible of my profession not to say a little something about that. Okay? Now, we're all wrong at times, okay? We're all wrong at times. And I recognize this is not a good church growth strategy, what I'm saying right now in the current climate. But, I was super successful in my 30s, all right? That's all I go with. I live into that, right? 40s, not so much, okay? We'll see what the 50s hold, we'll see. Excellent. Well, hey, it's great to see you. If you're a guest today, thank you for staying through that. Lasting through it. It's good to see everybody today. If you're tuning in online, if you're here in the room and you're a guest, welcome. Thank you so much. You are here at a community, a church, a group of people that cares deeply for our community, that cares deeply for people who feel spiritually dissatisfied, disconnected, disenfranchised, deconstructing of their faith. And so you are in a space that says you are welcome here. My name's Ryan. I'm the lead pastor. I am white, cisgendered, heterosexual male, born into a Christian home, which means I hit the privilege jackpot here in America because the systems and structures that hold us together were created for people who look like me, who love like me, who are gendered like me, all of those things. However, I don't feel any guilt about that, by the way. I don't feel guilt myself. I recognize that I didn't necessarily choose that. However, so people always say to me, why do you feel guilty about being white or a male or heterosexual? I don't feel guilty about that. I feel a deep burden that not everybody has the same privileges I have had. So to me, following Jesus is about naming those privileges, leveraging them for the sake of others, and getting the same privileges and affordances to all people, regardless of race, sex, gender, country in which you live in, all of those things. That's the kingdom of heaven that Jesus talked about. That's what I'm about. That's what we're about here. That's what gets us 1-star reviews on Google. If you really want to have a fun time, you should read the reviews, the 1-star reviews on Google. And I will tell you this, some people get really worried about that. This is not part of the message, okay? This is all free. I got to get some things off my chest this morning, all right? I want you to know, some people freak out about the 1-star Google reviews, but I get to have coffee with people who say, I came to Crossroads because of the 1-star Google reviews. They said, if they really do that, that's my place. So You all don't leave 1-star reviews, okay? That's okay. But don't freak out if people leave a 1-star review. It's okay. It's all right. So listen, part of the spirituality in which I try to walk out and live is really grounded in this beautiful thing called the Christ poem that we have in Philippians chapter 2 that says Jesus, who in the very nature of God did not consider equality with God something to grasp onto, but instead set aside all privilege and became like a servant, like a slave for the sake of us all. And that's what we're trying to do here. That's what it means to walk this peacemaking path. So whoever you are, however you've come into this space, whether you are certain about things, you're skeptical about faith, whether you're super hopeful, whether you're in a deep place of hurt, you're welcome here. And I do hope that you will join us together as we walk this peacemaking path of Jesus, because I do believe it can save us from the violence and oppression and injustices in our world. That's what it's about. So, all right. Now, let me address the other thing, okay? I just wouldn't worry too much about social media and what's happening with our church, okay? Like, there's all kinds of speculations. People are making crazy things up. I don't know where they're getting it. And that just is what it is. Here's the thing. I only have enough time to focus my attention on things that matter. And that should be your goal too, right? So just so you know, like, we are, as a community of faith, never going to do anything that harms the prosperity, the development of our city, of our community, in our move, in any of those things. So if you hear something on social media that's different than what you've heard here, you have a choice to make. Like, what do you want to trust? Like your faith community? I mean, I know you might not want to trust your pastor. I totally understand that. Or do you want to trust like social media fear? All right, so just keep that in mind. All right, so we're marching forward. We'll have an official update on things. For those of you that are guests that don't know, we're moving. We're selling this building. We're buying a new building. And we're excited about this transition and change and our ability to continue to do our work in really great and new and innovative, creative ways. And we'll have an update on that next week, okay? Because we still have some T's to cross, I's to dot on some contracts this week. So we'll have a full update next Sunday, all right? Okay, good. Well, let's close in prayer. Wait, let's receive the offering. We're going to take the donations, then close in prayer. Okay, how many of you know that relationships shape everything in our lives? The reality is we are social beings. We're social creatures. The joys that we experience, the growth, right? Sometimes our deepest struggles, they take place inside of relations. How about that transition into the actual message, all right? We are relationally bound together. And so this past Easter, we launched this new series called I Promise Me. And it's this 5-week journey where we're exploring promises, not that we make to other people, but that we make to ourselves as an expression of our love of self, right? Because our tradition teaches us that there's kind of 3 big things that we can do that will honor the divine in us. And the first is to love ourselves. And that is oftentimes the hardest. Second is loving others. You know what the easiest thing to do, to be honest with you, is to love God, because nobody knows what that means. So we can just define it however we want, right? But love of self is probably the most difficult. So this whole series is about how do we love ourselves enough to make commitments and promises to ourselves so that we can show up in every relationship with honesty, with compassion, with authenticity, right? And so it's inspired by some wisdom from a book called The 5 Agreements. And we're grounding all of this in these resurrection stories of Jesus, the different relationships that Jesus had in our resurrection stories with folks. So we're going to explore how these small, very intentional shifts can transform the way that we speak, the way that we listen, and ultimately the way that we love. That's what this is all about. So if you're in relationships right now and some of them feel new or strong or stuck somewhere in between, this series is really an invitation to rediscover connection, to practice grace for yourself, for others, and to build healthier ways of being in relationship together. And we start from the inside out, okay? Now, I have to give you a disclaimer because I got a great email from one of you all this week that said, hey, it's always good to remind folks that these principles that we're talking about are never and should never be used to keep people in abusive relationships. Okay? So some of you maybe had grown up or you've been a part of religious traditions that would tell you you have to love your enemies, you need to forgive your spouse, and then would put you back into a space where you were verbally or emotionally or physically abused. And I would tell you that that's evil. That's antichrist. So this series is about loving yourself enough to know when it's time to sing, hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back, right? I mean, this is a series about loving yourself and leaning into your own dignity, not surrendering yourself into circumstances under some very unhealthy understanding of spirituality, love of enemy, forgiveness, these kinds of things, all right? So we're talking about relationships that are not abusive, right? That you're navigating how those look and what that's going to be like, all right? So everybody got that. That's a very important thing to say. I was grateful for that email. That's always a good reminder that we make sure that that's very, very clear. If you are in a relationship and it is abusive, reach out. There's lots of resources. You can reach out to myself, and I'm not the resource, okay? But I will help you find the right resource. Our team, folks in the church, will help you find the right resources, okay? Our anchor verse for this series is a proverb, which is usually a wisdom saying that generally works if you're in the upper to middle class of a society. If you have some measure of privilege. So all the proverbs are written by very wealthy people who lived in palaces, all right? So it's always a good thing to keep that in mind, all right? So Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart, and that's what we're emphasizing, your heart with all vigilance. From it flow the springs of life, right? The task at hand is our heart, right? Our innermost being, like who we are, how we're going to show up, all right? And now last week, Dr. Aisha Thomas gave us a magical talk if you were here. If you weren't here, you're going to want to go back and listen to that for sure. And she challenged us with promise number 1, that we promise ourselves, I promise me that I will be impeccable with my word. I will be impeccable with my word, that basically my words will reflect honesty, they will reflect kindness and integrity, all right? So here we are, week number 2. I mean, I've already used up half my time and I haven't even got to it. That was just the review and me having a therapy session with you all right? I'm sorry. Okay, listen. How many of you, be honest, raise your hand up nice and high, as long as you put deodorant on. If not, just give it one of these, all right? You have started to have you set out to have this really tough conversation with someone in your life. You knew it was going to be tough. It's a hot button topic, and you were ready for it. You had your plan. You were going to stay calm. You were grounded in your truth. You did some meditative practice. You breathed. You prayed. You sang a worship song, whatever it might be that gets you in the zone. You had a piece of cake. I don't know. You had your Snickers beforehand, so you knew, okay, I'm not hungry. I'm not tired. I'm not angry. I'm not lonely. I'm ready to have this conversation. And you get in the conversation, and in like a matter of like 2 seconds, it gets like super emotional. Right? Have you ever done that? You're like, no, I've got this one. I just want to have a conversation. We were so calm. We're so cool. We're so collected. We got the plan. And then all of a sudden we aren't. Right? Something switched inside of us. And like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, we're like, what is going on? We were in control, and then we're out of control, right? And why does that happen? How do we justify ourselves in those moments where we set out, I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm clear, I'm collected, here we go. How do we justify ourselves? Well, what's happening is we tend to go into self-protect mode in those moments, right? We think, I'm going to have this good conversation. Then, in the midst of that conversation, we feel wounded or attacked by the other person. Or the other person feels wounded and attacked by us, and then emotion starts to fly, intelligence is like crashing, and we go into self-protect mode. Now, there's some pretty standard self-protect modes that we live in, right? That are a part of who we are. There's the fight self-protection mode. How many of you are fighters, right? Fight. Confronting threat with aggression. Like, oh, hell no, you did not just say that to me. No, right? And so we go after a person, right? We don't pause things, so we fight it. Or there's flight. Right? Flight is a self-protection mode where we flee, we run away, we avoid the situation, right? Or we freeze. You ever freeze in a moment? Like you're calm, you get so angry, it's like, I don't know what to say, right? You just kind of get stuck, you're unable to act. Fawn is one. Some of you might not know about fawning, but fawning is like the people-pleasing mode. It's like we kind of ignore all of our boundaries and we just get super agreeable, we get helpful, we get compliant. right? Maybe even in a moment where we're just trying to prevent someone from getting more and more angry, we don't hold our sacred ground, we just kind of go with it. These are all ways in which like emotion and fear take over and we go into self-protection mode. But here's the thing, self-protection mode will quickly become self-destruction mode. Because all of self-protection modes are really based upon emotions and chemicals flowing out of a space of fear, flowing out of a space of feeling attacked. And so the very strategies that we do kind of need sometimes, when we stay in those spaces, right? When we stay there, all of a sudden they become patterns that sabotage our love of ourselves. They sabotage our ability to love. And then here's what happens. This sacred identity that you have, hear me, a sacred identity that you have as a child of capital L love, right? That identity that you have all of a sudden is questioned. We start questioning our value. We start responding and reacting instead of holding our space. And our sacred power that comes from our sacred identity, that is to live free of guilt and shame, begins to be eroded. And then all of a sudden we live in this space where we're just like, why did I do that? What happened? I'm no good, right? We allow other people and their words and what's happening to us and our response to those words. And we spiral. And this generally happens, why? When we feel attacked, when we feel disrespected, when we feel like we're not believed. And in those moments, what's happening is someone's pain is showing up. So you and I, we start to have a conversation with someone, or someone starts to have a conversation with us, a very reasonable conversation. I've asked you 57 times to please put your dishes in the dishwasher. For those of you with enough privilege to have a dishwasher and another person in your life, and a dish. There's a lot of privileges in this story. I just want you to recognize that, okay? And you go, I've asked you 57 times, what can we do here? How do we fix this? Right, how do we fix this? And then it just goes out, whoa. And you're like, why is the response to me asking you to put your dish in the dishwasher so extreme? Because in that response, there's past pain that's showing up. There's a wound from whatever reasons, right? And that action shows up and makes an appearance. And those actions then, like that response, that wound that makes an appearance, it all of a sudden starts wounding other people. It's like a little Pac-Man wound, just goes around, biting everybody. Some past wound in my life, you say the wrong thing, it shows up, and then it's like out of the cage. You know? It's just devouring everybody around me. You know what Paul calls this in like far more theological terms? He calls this the power of sin. Right? The power of sin at work. Why do I do what I don't want to do? Why don't I do what I want to do? Oh, woe is me. It's the power of sin at work in me. It's our wounds that make an appearance in our reactions, and then it's just like off to the races. So when that wound gets reopened from a childhood experience, from a past relationship, from a fear that sits just under the surface, we start wounding others. We often wound ourselves. And what's happened? All of our sacred power to be in a space has been stolen. Like that wound has become the dictator of my life. Your wound has become the dictator of my life. But here's the really, really good news. We might even call it gospel, right? The good news is that the resurrection narratives of Jesus and his interactions offer us a new way of showing up when that wound gets touched. The resurrection narratives give us a picture that we can actually show up, that Jesus is inviting us to allow those things that we have experienced not to determine our value. And what we see in one really beautiful story from post-resurrection with Jesus is that he doesn't allow the wounds of others to determine the value of him or his response to their wounds. So he's not going to give up his sacred power to anybody. He's not going to let somebody's frustrations or doubts or fears determine how he responds, right? So if we look at the story of Thomas, we see this really beautiful picture of how we're invited to show up when somebody else's wounds make an appearance in an experience or in a relationship. Here's what it says. Now, you got to remember the story. Jesus appears before all the disciples except for Thomas, right? And what happens is Thomas, he's not there, the text tells us. He's not there, he's out. when Jesus shows up. And the other disciples, when Thomas shows up, they say, we've seen the Lord. We saw Jesus. And again, like I said before, like I always want to know, where was Thomas? Like this is like the most, like the most terrible timing for a beer run. Like what, he's just gone, right? And for a person who already has a disposition towards doubt, right? Like this has got to be super frustrating. It's like, how many of y'all ever driven up to Estes Park? Y'all ever driven up there, and you're right, and you're driving up, and somebody's like, oh, look, the bighorn sheep, and you've wanted to see the bighorn sheep for every time, but you never do. But you had your phone in your face, and you missed it, but everybody else in the car was like, it was so cool, and you're just sitting there like, what? How did I miss it? But you did see the latest Facebook thing, right? It's like everybody around you gets in on the joke, gets in on seeing it, but you don't, right? And you're like, your response could be they're all lying to you. Right? No, there were no bighorn sheep. You're making that up. Or you get irritated with yourself. Oh, I can't believe I missed it again. So Thomas, he goes the route of calling everybody a liar. Like he says to them all, unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, I put my finger in the mark of the nails and my hand in his side, I will not believe. You all are lying liar pants. Right? We don't think about it, but that's what he's saying, right? Now, here's the thing. Thomas's reaction was a product of his experience. Thomas had a wound, and that wound shows up when the disciples say something very exciting. We saw Jesus. And Thomas's wound makes an appearance in the room. He's like, I won't believe it. No way. Behind Thomas's response was pain, frustration, disappointment. Now, can I say something too for those of us that maybe grew up in a religious tradition that said this? I'm going to get in so much trouble. Okay, listen. Oh. Let me preface this. I do not believe that having a quote-unquote point of salvation experience is necessarily a bad thing. So if you have ever done the raise your hand, pray the prayer, invite Jesus into your heart, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, okay? So if that's a part of your faith and it's meaningful for you, I bless you in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, okay? Now that we have that said, a lot of us in those same traditions that reduced the life, teachings, death, resurrection, ascension, gift of the Holy Spirit, all these things in our church that reduced it down to some magic prayer would also tell us that if you don't pray that prayer, you cannot be in relationship with God, that you will forever be separated from God. Okay, Thomas is offered the opportunity to believe someone else's witness. He rejects it. Are you following me? He doesn't pray the prayer. In fact, he says, I won't believe if I don't see it with my own eyes, if I don't touch it. I won't do it. All right, just hold that, okay? So I just want you to hold that in your heart for a second. A little tension. We'll get back to it. So, but he says, I won't believe it. Now, this had to have caused like a beef with the disciples, right? They had to have been like, well, what do you mean you don't believe us? When have we ever lied to you? He's like, oh, right, whatever, I don't know. But he's like, what are you talking about? Like he's essentially calling them all liars. Like your word is nothing to me. I will not believe it. I wonder if, I just imagine Peter like totally getting in his face. Like this almost near bar fight in this moment. Like Peter shoving him and Thomas like, what are you doing? This is what I'm talking about. You don't know Jesus. You haven't seen him. Look at how angry you are, violent you are. They're in a big argument. But the text tells us a week later, the disciples were again gathered in the house and Thomas was with them this time. Now Thomas is there. I don't know how happy he is to be there. I wonder if the disciples are happy that he's there. He's in a space of tension with everybody. It's been a week. 7 days is a long time when everybody else has had like some party experience. They've seen the guy and you're just like, not until I believe it. Not until I see it will I believe it. So there's this tension that exists, a week of friction, a week of frustration, a week of feeling like an outsider. Why would Jesus come then? If he's so brilliant, wouldn't he know I wasn't there? That's a whole other side of this story. Like if you want to take it literally, you got to ask Jesus is the one who had the poor timing. Oh, that was too far. Sorry. My bad. Do not question Jesus. Okay, I got that one on the list. Wow. All right. You all got silence on that one. That joke was not funny, Parker. Please don't interpret it. Okay, here we go. Parker saves me, at least with our non-hearing community. So there's all this friction there, right? And it says, although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them. And he says, peace be with you. Good opening line when you magically appear in the middle of a room, right? Jesus read the room correctly. Why? Because the experience with the resurrected Jesus was paranormal in this story, right? It was paranormal. For those folks that come at you all the time with like you having to like hold to certain values and beliefs about what that resurrection experience was like, just remind them, poof, Jesus is there. That is not normal embodied reality, okay? So he shows up in the middle of the room. Now remember, paranormal, it just means a phenomenon, an event that is beyond the scope of normal scientific understanding, okay? I'm not talking about the truth of the story. I'm just saying we should agree people generally don't poof appear, right? Unless it's Star Trek. Star Trek, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden Jesus is there. And this is one of those magic moments that Dr. Aisha talked about last week, right? And I love it. So she's talking about it. She's giving us these magic moments that we just can't explain. The experience is there. And I wonder if the disciples, when Jesus shows up, like their first response was like, oh, yeah. Like, eat that, Thomas, right? Like, call me a liar. And they're probably like, get him, Jesus. He didn't believe. He didn't pray the prayer. He said he wouldn't believe until he saw you. That's what he said, Jesus. I don't know if you know that or not. I don't know if you were there. But that's what he said. And a lot of us grew up in a tradition that would tell us the response to that is, get away from me, I never knew you. A lot of us grew up in a tradition that would tell us that the God of Jesus would say to you, you didn't choose me, I don't choose you. Off to eternity, conscious torment where you burn forever and ever and ever. So wouldn't we expect that to be Jesus' response to Thomas? Well, if that's what you believe, that's what it should say. But that's not it. Look at Jesus' response. He looks at Thomas and he does something I'd never say. He's like, touch me. He's like, put your fingers here and see my hands. Right here. Reach out your hand, put it on my side. Don't doubt, but believe. He doesn't condemn Thomas. He doesn't say, you know what, Thomas, had you responded at the opportunity that you had been given, you'd be in the club. But unfortunately, you have all this past experience and pain and hurt and disappointment and doubt, and it kept you from me, and I'm just too petty to get past that. You're going to have to leave. You need to open the door and walk out. I don't. That's not what Jesus does. Here's what's so amazing. He doesn't take Thomas's response personally. Man. Now, he does go on and he says, blessed are those who believe without seeing. There's a joy in that. But he doesn't say, cursed are those who don't believe because they couldn't see. Right? It's not in there. And so we have this beautiful picture that Jesus met Thomas where? In Thomas's truth. In Thomas's experience. He knew the complexity of the pain that Thomas had in his heart, whatever it was. And he doesn't shame, he doesn't rebuke, he doesn't respond with anger, he isn't taken out of the moment. Jesus, his response honors the darkness of Thomas's past and encourages Thomas into a brighter future. You know what he doesn't say, for those of you that like these kinds of questions, and this bothers me to no end? Well, why would you do that? I hate that question. If that's in your vocabulary when somebody makes a mistake, you need to go to your prayer closet. And I don't even believe in prayer closets, but you need to go there and work that out. It's just a shaming statement. Why would you do that? Why would you say that? That's not really a helpful question in the moment, right? It's worth exploring, but maybe with a trained professional, not somebody who's hurt by you, right? Like, it's like when a little kid accidentally spills milk. Like, why would you do that? Like, because I felt like your life was too calm at this moment. So I went for it. One time I want to be at a restaurant and hear a parent ask their kid that, and the kid be like, I learned it by watching you, something like that. I don't know, Like, Jesus doesn't shame. He says, okay. Okay, beloved, come here. Here it is. Let me meet you where you are. He extends his hands and his sides in tenderness. His physical wounds meet Thomas's emotional wounds. Why? Because Jesus knew the value of himself and of his wounds. He knew that his wounds were a part of his worth. Jesus knew that his wounds did not, in any way, shape, or form, make him less valuable, but they were incorporated into the story. His wounds became sacred. You'll hear me oftentimes talk about the difference between sacred wounds and stupid wounds. Sacred wounds are wounds that we bring to the divine love, and we say, if you can somehow use this pain, this hurt, this harm that was done to me to restore, to heal, to bring life, then I am making it available. That does not mean that I ascribe some vindictive, evil nature to God who says, well, the only way this can happen in your life is if you go through this abuse or if you go through this pain. I don't believe that at all, but I believe in redemption. I believe that what someone means for evil, love can transform and use it for good. Doesn't mean it's the only path, doesn't mean it has to be. And in that moment of tenderness, when Jesus, who's standing there, who knows his value and his worth, and Thomas's doubt has nothing to do with it. He's not like, how could Thomas doubt me? I'm a loser. Did I not? I got to do more. No, Thomas's doubt has nothing to do with Jesus' understanding of his worth and the value of his wounds, right? Nothing to do with it. And when that tenderness comes, when he responds, not as a reaction to Thomas, but as a space of love and value, Thomas says what? My Lord and my God. My Lord and my God. There's something really powerful about this moment in this story that we're given. And it's teaching us something about the divine nature. It's not teaching us history. So let me just say this. I say this all the time. Like, I don't really care if there was a camera in the room and it happened this way. Because I believe what this story is teaching us is that how you're encountering the divine is when you've been accepted fully in all of your weaknesses, in all of your pains, in all of your doubts, in all of your questions. And when you encounter a love that stands in the face of your doubt and your anger and your frustration and your pain and says, come and give me a hug, you have found God. That's the point of the story. You have found God. That's the beauty of it. And the invitation, right, is that we can live in a similar way, right? That when we're in this tension, right, we don't have to respond from our pain. We can respond like Jesus with understanding and compassion and dignity. Why did Jesus respond like that? Because he chose love. He chose love. Even in the face of pain and hurt, he chose love and he chose grace and he chose compassion. And he chose not to take Thomas's doubts, pain, and hurt as a personal attack. He had a filter, a gospel filter, a way of seeing the world that says the anger, the hatred, the violence that people perpetrate against me and others comes from a place of woundedness. And to respond to those wounds with more wounding only makes the problem worse. Now, that does not mean that I continue to put myself in a space where I'm constantly wounded. I put up borders and boundaries and barriers for people, but that doesn't mean that I allow their woundedness that shows up to start moving me towards that space. And so this story, Jesus invites us into a second promise that we can make to ourselves to show up in every relationship with confidence, with authenticity, and with compassion. And that is this: I promise me that I will not define my worth by someone else's reaction. I will not take it personally. I will assume pain and heartbreak and loss. You know my trick for doing this sometimes, especially when it's a person who's acting really vile? I try to imagine that person as just a little baby. Just a little baby, born into innocence and life and a whole lot of experiences, a whole lot of hurt, a whole lot of wounds have produced what stands in front of me. And maybe that softens my heart for about 6 seconds. Then I'm like, oh, I will tweet you, but don't even, no. But I have to think about those things, right? See, the reality is the question isn't whether or not people will react from pain. They're going to do that. The question is this: whether their reaction will get to tell us who we are. Will their reaction and their woundedness create me? Will it form me? Will it tell me who I am or not? So in our everyday normal lives, how do we do this? How do we start to live out? Well, first of all, I would tell you, stop surrendering your power to others' pain. Stop it. I wrote this in and I was like, this is the worst everyday normal life action step, because it's so nefarious. It's when people say, well, just stop worrying. It's like, Ryan, you're an idiot, okay? But I do want to encourage you, and to stop doing that is to recognize that we surrender our power when we let other people's response and reaction to us determine our behavior, right? So whenever we do that, whenever we allow someone else to determine our value, our response, who we are in that moment, we surrender the sacred power that's been placed in us as a person made in the image of God, loved eternally. You made me so mad. There's no power in that statement. You have no power in that statement. They made me so mad. I can't believe you made me so mad. They put me on tilt. Right? These are things where we're powerless. We're giving up our power. How many of you have ever heard of the person Pema Chodron? Anybody ever heard of Pema? So Pema is an American Buddhist teacher, a Buddhist nun, author, is written prolifically, inspires millions of people with this real down-to-earth message of practicing peace in turbulent times. And this is what she writes. She says this: you are the sky. Everything else is just the weather. You're the sky, everything else is just weather. And this quote really portrays the true nature of who we are, right? The sky, it's vast, it's open, it's stable. Emotions and thoughts, external circumstances, people's pain are temporary, they're passing. And this is a core concept of her teachings, right? How do we hold to and how do we live this non-attachment to other people's thinking about us, other people's emotions? How do we learn to let those things pass? How do we maintain our equanimity amidst all of life's challenges, all of those things? And this big question that is presented to us is, does the weather determine what kind of day I'm going to have? It's a good question. You got plans for the day. What do you like to do on a nice day outside? I don't want to give white heterosexual vibes. So what do you like to do? I'm I like to golf. I don't know. What? If you're a golfer, sorry. I did for a long time. It's fine. What do you like to do on a nice sunny day? Barbecue. What else? Walk. Fish. Ball game. Pickleball. That was a white middle-aged woman. Pickleball. Who was it? I'm just kidding. It's just a joke. It's funny because it's a little true, but it's just a joke, okay? Oh gosh, why anybody comes here, I don't know. Okay, listen. I was truly it just came out. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I'm going to get an email from all the white middle-aged women. There are other people that play. There are white middle-aged men that play pickleball too. Okay, it's fine. I'm just kidding. It's another joke. I can't stop myself. Stop me. Okay. Those are all the things you want to do on a nice day. We're going to go play pickleball. You wake up and it's raining outside. And now you're faced with a choice. Is your life miserable that day? I can't play pickleball. I was going to play pickleball. Now I can't play pickleball, so I'm going to just brew all day inside about how fun it would be to play pickleball. That's one option. Some of us do that, right? If I can't, I would get stuck, and I'm just. Or you go, well, the day gave me some rain. What do you like to do when it's raining outside? Sleep. Walk. Bake. Read. What? I see a hand back there being super polite. What is that? Video games. I like it. Right? Or we can go, well, I was going to play pickleball, but now I'm going to play video games. Now I'm going to read. Now I'm going to sleep. Right? We can redeem the moment, right? The weather will always have a say in your day, undoubtedly, but it doesn't have to control your response. You can rage against it, or you can respond with your own sacred power. You can respond and you can make the day you deserve. I heard somebody say that a while back. They said, I hope you make the day great. I said, that's so good. I heard somebody one time say, I hope you have the day you deserve. That I really liked. It's like, that might not be appropriate for me to say, but by all means, no. Right? Go make the day great. Remember, your worth is too sacred to be handed over to the weather, to somebody else's wounds that showed up in your life, to a thunderstorm that might have come in. Your worth is too valuable to surrender. Your pain is too powerful to surrender. And so here's the other question I have for you, because we all want to assume that we're the victims, right? Yeah. It's everybody else that does this, okay? Is your past pain bringing tension into a present relationship? Are you the storm cloud? Woo! I'm not going to answer that question, but you can. And if in your heart you're like, yep, there's a pain that's just showing back up, I'm that storm cloud, I'm that thunderstorm, oh, I want to encourage you, tend to that wound. Because that wound will destroy you and destroy others. And it's hard work, it's not easy, but get with a helping professional, sit with a trusted friend, sit with a mentor, speak it, own it. It will lose its power as you do that. Naming something is a power move. Did you know that? How many of you have ever had children and you've said things to yourself like, I gave birth to you, I gave you your name, I will take it away, right? When you name something, you exercise power over it. It's one of the atrocities of colonialism. When enslaved people were renamed. But there's power over naming something in your life, this wound. This is what it is. And so in every type of relationship, I want to encourage you to respond from your sacred identity, not your sacred wound. Let your wounds become sacred. Let them form your value. Let them become integrated in and assimilated into all that you are. But don't respond from them. Respond from your sacred identity. So in new relationships, don't change who you are because you're afraid a new person is not going to want to be around you. If you're in a really strong relationship, give yourself some space for differences. Don't think that there's a disagreement, that's somehow destructive of the relationship. If you're in a stagnant relationship, lean into your sacred power and say, I do have the power to get rid of old patterns. I do have the power to get rid of old narratives, to try new and novel ways of engaging with this stagnant relationship. If you're in a relationship that's transitioning, it's changing, lean into your sacred power and let go of needing to be right. Let go of that other person needing to know that they were wrong. Let others walk a different path and love them in their path. Learn from them on their path. Live a life of curiosity. And in our lives, when we stop allowing others' responses, others' wounds to determine our worth, to determine how we show up, we learn the power of healthy pride. Healthy pride. Not arrogance, but worth and dignity